Slave quarters, life, resistance, and food in enslaved communities. Slave quarters in Brazilian colonial and imperial Brazil. Senzalas were the living quarters assigned to enslaved people on plantations, sugar mills, and mining areas. Usually built with simple materials such as wattle and daub, clay, and wood. They were long barrack-like structures or clusters of small huts, typically located far from the Casa Grande, the plantation owner's house, which symbolized power and control. Life in the slave quarters was marked by overcrowding, dozens of people sharing the same space, poor ventilation and lighting, sleeping on the ground or on straw mats, scarcity of clothing and personal belongings, constant surveillance and physical punishment. Despite these harsh conditions, the senzalas also became spaces of community. Stories, songs, religious beliefs, and African knowledge were shared and preserved there, surviving despite the violence of slavery. Food in the slave quarters, the food provided by slave owners, was generally basic and insufficient. The diet varied depending on the region and economic activity, but often included cassava flour, corn beans, dried or salted meat, often scraps, thin porridge, or mush in many cases. Enslaved people cultivated small gardens during limited free time or raised chickens and pigs to supplement their diet. These small plots were a form of survival and limited autonomy within the oppressive system. Flavors that survived even with scarce resources. African men and women brought culinary techniques and ingredients that deeply shaped Brazilian cuisine. Dishes with African roots or strong influence include acarajé, vatapá, caruru, angu, feijoada, whose origins are historically debated, but often associated with the use of less valued cuts of pork. These meals were sometimes prepared using leftovers discarded by slave owners, combined with African spices, peppers, and cooking techniques. Food became not only sustenance, but also cultural expression and resistance. Other regions of the world in the United States and the Caribbean, similar housing structures were known as slave quarters. Conditions were comparable to those in Brazil: simple cabins, poor sanitation, and food strictly controlled by plantation owners. In the United States, the typical diet often included cornmeal, salted pork, molasses, vegetables, grown in small garden plots. From these kitchens emerged culinary traditions that later influenced what is now known as Southern and African American cuisine, including the foundations of what became soul food. Between suffering and resistance, slave quarters symbolize the dehumanization imposed by the slave system. Yet they also represent cultural resilience. Within these spaces, identities were preserved. Music was created. Afro-Brazilian and Afro-Atlantic religions were strengthened, and culinary traditions were born. Food, in particular, became a living link between past and present, a testament to how, even in the midst of oppression, African culture survived and profoundly shaped Brazil and other societies across the Americas.